Hello, believers, non-believers, and everyone in between. You're listening to Stories with Sapphire. I am Sapphire Sandalo. Now get cozy and open your mind because it's story time. Happy Thursday, everyone. Welcome to the Vibe Stream. This is the live stream that I do every Thursday at 4 Pacific Standard Time. I read a book from my library, and we are making our way through more bones. Scary stories around the world. From around the world. So it's very cold in LA today. It actually hailed, which is wild. Anyways, I know it feels weird. I used to have a fake plant right there, and then I got a real plant, but she's not as big as the fake plant, so you can't see her. But maybe she'll grow. All right. So, this is called, this is a classic, The Headless Horseman. Here we go. Rain dripped from the brim of Morty's oilskin hat, and sheets of lightning flashed across the sky. His coat was soaked. He urged his mare on, nudging her with his heels. Not that she needed much encouragement. Wasn't she the horse who jumped any fence, raced any challenger, and galloped home with a bit clamped in her teeth? She was as eager to get back to her dry stall as Morty was to reach his fireside. "That's a girl," he said like that a girl, he said as she galloped along the bank of the Blackwater. Morty had ridden all the way to Ballyhooly to buy a new bridle for her. Only the finest leather, stitched by the finest saddler in Ireland, was good enough for his old mare. But he had lingered too long in the village with friends. It wasn't until the sky suddenly darkened that he noticed the storm clouds rolling overhead. His mare slowed to a trot when they reached the bottom of Kilcummer Hill. To the left were the ruins of the old church. Torrents of rain splashed off the broken walls and gravestones. Morty looked at the sky, hoping to see a break in the clouds, but all he saw was more lightning. It lit up the road. Worse yet, it lit up something unbelievable just beyond his right shoulder. His mare snorted. Morty wiped the rain out of his eyes. There was no way that a big black horse's head could be moving alongside him without a body and without legs. He wiped the rain out of his eyes and blinked. But there it was, with its short ears, enormous eyes, and broad nostrils. It was higher than his mare, as if the head belonged to a much bigger horse. Now, Morty wasn't one to spook easily. If he were, he wouldn't be traveling in the dark with lightning crackling overhead. Nonetheless, he felt a bit strange, riding beside a horseless head. Just imagine how he felt when the rest of the horse appeared. Morty was dumbfounded. Another sheet of lightning had revealed a 6-foot gap between the horseless head and the headless horse. Yet both parts moved steadily down the road. His mare snorted again, but didn't bolt. She was every bit as hard to spook as her master. As soon as Morty got used to the disjointed horse, he waited for another flash of lightning. This time, he finally saw a rider. The man sat high above him, partly because the black horse was so big and partly because the rider was so tall. Morty was surprised to see that he was dressed in an old-fashioned hunting coat, the kind his great-grandfather might have worn. Oddly enough, a couple of its shiny buttons were floating a full yard behind. Every time lightning flashed, Morty looked up quickly, but he couldn't see the man's head. He finally told his mare, "He has no head at all." "Look again, Morty," said a raspy voice that seemed to be coming from about the level of the man's waist. Lightning flashed, and Morty looked. There, under the rider's right arm, was a head unlike any head Morty had ever seen. It was ashy pale, with skin pulled tight against the skull, huge black eyes, and a mouth that reached from ear to ear. The gigantic horse's head kept moving along, followed by its body, and the hideous rider's head, it kept moving, too, back and forth, as the motion of the horse made the rider's arm move to and fro. One moment it was hidden by the rider's coat, and the next moment it was in full, ghastly view. Morty rode up the hill quietly for a spell, not wanting to do anything that might upset his strange companion. But when nothing bad happened, Morty decided to strike up a conversation. "Your honor rides mighty well." "Humph," growled the horrible head. Morty tried again. "That's a brave horse your honor rides." "Humph." This time the head's answer was muffled by the man's coat. "He looks like a fine racer." The ghastly head swung forward, leering from ear to ear. "Will you race me, Morty?" "Gladly, if the night weren't so dark. I don't want to lame my old mare." "Will you take my word for your mare's safety?" asked the head, peering out from under the man's arm. What could Morty do? He had never turned down a race or shied from a jump in his entire life. And if that headless horseman could ride a headless horse, his strange powers could surely protect an old mare. Morty nudged her with his heels, and she shot ahead. She galloped so gallantly that the horses stayed neck and neck at first. But what mortal horse could match the stride of such a monstrous competitor? When the black horse passed the mare, the man's grisly head turned to look back at Morty, almost slipping out from under the arm that held it. "You have a stout heart, Morty," he shouted. "I have been looking for the likes of you for 100 years, ever since my horse and I broke our necks at the bottom of Killcomer Hill. You're the first who dared to ride with me." Morty urged his mare forward, and she thundered all the way to the top of the hill. When the black horse veered to the right, the mare followed. But suddenly, there was nothing under her hooves. Both horses had raced off the edge of the cliff. Morty realized he and his mare were about to crash on the rocks below, but the black horse was floating through the air. Morty cried out, "You gave your word for my mare's safety." "Ha!" came the ghostly reply. "You should know better than to trust a headless horseman." What? That's funny. Yeah, I don't think I ever read. I don't think I just know of the Headless Horseman. I don't know like what his deal is. Adam, thank you for the super chat. Everyone should go and join Sapphire's Patreon for a bone throwing reading. She's great. Ah, thank you, Adam. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Laurel, this sounds almost more like a Doulahan than the usual story of the Headless Horseman. Yeah, maybe. I think there's a lot of crossover, and there's so many variations of a horseman in Irish folklore. Like there's also the Nukalavi. I don't know if I said that right, where it's like a horse but has like an extra torso on top of it. Enchanted Uni, does anyone know if she has a podcast on Spotify? Yes, I do. There is a podcast called Stories with Sapphire, and it's on Spotify, it's on Apple Podcasts, it's wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please listen to it. All right. Who here likes werewolf stories? We got a werewolf in the forest. This is from Eastern Europe. One morning, a poor man was walking in the forest when a weasel scooted across the path. The man was so startled that he jumped and yelled. The weasel was so startled that it dropped what it was carrying and raced into the underbrush. And what did the weasel drop? A ring. A shiny gold ring. The man was dumbfounded. Where in the world did the weasel find it? He wondered. He picked up the ring and wiped weasel spit off on his ragged sleeve. He could see that the ring was made of gold and was covered with intricate carving. On the inside, strange letters were engraved. The man was puzzled. He turned the ring around and around in his hand. Never had he seen anything quite so valuable or quite so mysterious. Then he remembered a tale his grandmother had told him long ago. It had to do with rings granting wishes. But what were the magic words? As he slipped the ring onto his finger, he suddenly remembered. He could almost hear his grandmother's voice saying, "Ring of gold, ring of old, do my bidding as you're told." He repeated her words out loud and tested them. "Bring me a bag of gold coins," he said. Out of nowhere, a small leather bag appeared and landed at his feet. He reached for it with trembling hands. Could his wish really have come true? He tugged it open and was astonished to see gold coins inside. He slipped the ring and the coins into his pocket and ran out of the forest, across the fields, into the village, and to the marketplace. There he bought a new coat for himself, a new shawl for his wife, and enough food to last them for weeks. Did this make his wife happy? Not at all. "Where did the money come from?" she demanded. All he would say was, "It's a miracle." Well, his wife was determined to solve the mystery. She nagged him about it every day, and when he refused to tell her, she pretended to weep. "You must have stolen it," she cried. She knew very well that he was not a thief, but she also knew that he would be horrified to be called one. "A weasel gave me a magic ring," he said. "A likely story," she scoffed. "You expect me to believe that?" He reluctantly led her to the chest where he had hidden the ring. The moment he opened the lid, she grabbed the ring and made a wish. "I want a huge house," she said. Nothing happened. She tried again. Still nothing happened. "You fool," she said. "When you stole the coins, you must have stolen the ring too." The poor man couldn't stand having his wife think such terrible thoughts about him, so he told her the magic words. "Is this the way you do it?" she asked. Ring of gold, do my bidding as you're told." "That's right," he said, never expecting that she would turn a wish against him. But she wanted that ring for herself. She repeated the magic words and added something horrible. "Turn my husband into a werewolf and send him to the forest, where he can howl night and day." Zap! The man vanished, and a werewolf materialized in front of her. It immediately began to howl and leaped out the window, pulled into the forest by the magic wish. The villagers were terrified when they saw the werewolf. No one dared set foot on the street after sundown. At night, they barred their doors and shivered every time they heard the anguished howling. Meanwhile, the poor man's wife was living in luxury. She now had a large house, elegant clothes, servants, jewels, and food fit for a queen. No one can imagine how she suddenly became so rich. Of course, her husband knew. Even though he was in that werewolf's body, he could still think like a man. He hated being a werewolf and realized that nothing could help him return to his former life. Except for magic. So, one night, when the moon was full, he left the forest to look for the gold ring. When he saw his wife's magnificent new home, he didn't know which room was which. He paused by each window until he heard her snoring. Now, he knew that he had found her bedroom. It was all he could do to keep from howling, but he didn't want to awaken her. So he clamped his mouth shut and leaped through the window. In the moonlight, he could see the very chest in which he had first hidden the ring. It stood by the foot of the bed, close to his sleeping wife. He took the handle in his mouth and slowly pulled the lid open. To his horror, the hinges creaked. His wife tossed and turned in her sleep, but soon she was snoring as loudly as before. He rooted around in his chest with his nose, and when he uncovered the ring, he grabbed it with his teeth and leaped out the window. The magic words that rang through the forest that night sounded more like barks and howls, but at last, the ring understood. The werewolf disappeared, zap, and the poor man stood in its place. He picked up the ring and thought hard for a moment. "Ring of gold, ring of old, do my bidding as you're told." He made his wish, then tossed the ring as far as he could into a tangle of bushes. As the man walked out of the forest, a donkey started to bray in the distance. When he reached home, a donkey ran to meet him, braying furiously. "I thought you would rather be a donkey than a werewolf," he said to his wife, and he entered his house smiling. What? So the ring understood werewolf? Who did a 10-year-old write this? Maybe. I don't know. Do we have time for one more? This one looks long. Hang on. see if there's a shorter one. No. Oh, here we go. All ready? All right, this is our last one for tonight. This is called The Gruesome Test, and this is from Japan. Suitors came from all over Japan to woo a beautiful maiden. First, they fell in love with her, then they ran away. Some were heard screaming as they raced down the road. Suspicious neighbors spread rumors. They suspected that the maiden might actually be a goblin or a fox woman. Her parents were mystified. Why did their lovely daughter terrify young men? She was gentle, happy, and hardworking. She didn't complain when helping her mother around the house and never wasted a single grain of rice when she cooked their meals. What more could parents desire? Grandchildren. That's why the couple wanted their daughter to marry. Besides, the aging father needed a strong son-in-law to help him grow rice, and he needed him soon. Arranged marriages had been the tradition for as many generations as anyone could remember. But long ago, the father had decided to let his beloved daughter choose a husband for herself. One spring, he began to regret his decision. He sat beneath a flowering cherry tree, watching pink petals fall to the ground. Would his daughter's youth fade away as quickly as the delicate flowers? Just as he was losing hope that she would never marry, a soldier came striding up to the house. "May I court your daughter?" asked the bold young man. The father liked his broad shoulders and muscular arms, good for planting rice. "Come right in," he said, and he happily introduced the young man to his daughter. The maiden moved gracefully about the room, serving the soldier tea and rice. She seemed shy, speaking softly and lowering her eyes. The young man seemed smitten. When the meal was over, she accompanied him to the door and quietly invited him to come back. "But not until midnight," she whispered, "and knock lightly so you do not awaken my parents." He was surprised, but not half as surprised as he was when he returned that night. The moment he entered the house, she made a very strange request. "You must promise on your honor," she whispered, "that you will submit to a test of your love for me, and promise that you will never tell a living soul what that test is." And there they are. The young man couldn't imagine what the maiden had in mind, but he agreed to remain silent. "On my honor, I will never tell." "Then wait here," she said. She slid open the paper screen to her room and closed it behind her. The soldier waited impatiently. When she returned, she was wearing a loose white garment. Oddly enough, the handle of a shovel poked out from under her hem. "Follow me," she whispered. She moved through the village under a cloudy sky with only fleeting glimpses of the moon. On such a night, ghosts were said to wander. The soldier followed the white figure ahead of him, careful not to awaken sleeping dogs. They slipped through the village streets to the woods beyond, hurrying down the dark road until they reached an ancient cemetery. When the moon emerged from the clouds, they could see old gravestones covered with moss and mold. Here and there, bamboo cups held wilted flowers. Weathered statues of gods stood guard, protecting souls. The maiden stopped by a grave that looked quite fresh. She pulled forth her shovel and began to dig, flinging clods of dirt to one side. Then she dropped to her knees and swept aside dirt with her hands. The soldier could see that she had uncovered a small coffin. Imagine his surprise when she lifted the lid, opened the white shroud, and tore an arm off the corpse inside. Then she clamped it in her teeth and took a large bite. I don't like where this is going. "If you love me, you will eat what I eat," she cried, ripping the other arm off the corpse and tossing it to the soldier. He didn't hesitate. He took a large bite himself. Now he was even more surprised. He was eating a candy corpse made of sugar and rice flour. The maiden burst out laughing. "You are the only one of my suitors who did not run away. I want to marry a brave husband, and you are the one." You would think that the soldier would laugh too. The maiden was not a monster, after all. But he glowered at her. "Only candy," he said. "I thought you were giving me much more." He grabbed her shovel and began to dig up a real grave. This time, it was the maiden who ran away screaming. That's kind of fun. I like that one, to be honest. Had anyone heard that before? I'm just gonna mark off where we left so that. Ooh, this next. All right, next week we're going to Italy. All right, let me catch up with the chat here. Althea Maeve. Naka-apil nako sa imong live. Lodi? I don't know what Lodi is. You finally, I can attend a live. Yay. Oh, you're from Sikihor. Oh my gosh, I've always wanted to go. How do I say that? Gusto ko moabot. No. Gusto moabot ko sa Sikihor? Did I say that right? Cool. All right, y'all. That's the end of our vibe stream today. Thanks for vibing with me. Do I have anything else to announce? No, I've got a live stream on Wednesday. And that is at 5 p.m. Pacific. And then another vibe stream on Thursday. Sorry, I just got like a really massive headache. Whoa. All right. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. Peace.